Welcome back to Retrieving Sanity, a podcast where we dive into the depths of mental health one laugh at a time. I'm your host Keegan, and I'm here to talk about everything from anxiety and depression to self-care and finding joy in the everyday. Because, let's face it, life can suck, but we don't have to navigate it alone. Retrieving Sanity is a partner with Podcast for Prevention, an initiative from Start Day 1 that aims to prevent suicide and promote mental health awareness. Together, we're working to break the stigma and create a more supportive community. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and let's retrieve our sanity together. And today we have a very special guest, and her name is Anne Hintz. She's an inner explorer. I said that right?
Yes, you did. You got it.
Awesome. So, how have you been doing today?
I've been doing good. Yeah, it's been a nice day here in California.
Oh, California. At the moment, are you near where those fires have been happening?
No, I'm in Northern California. Yeah, so they're a few hundred miles away.
Oh, okay. Good. That is good to hear. I can't imagine being that close to something so scary. So, whew.
Yeah, I'm in fire country, so we do have fires here, but luckily not many this year, which was nice.
Real quick, I know we are going to get into your story, but I didn't really think about it. But a natural disaster zone, does that play a huge part on your day-to-day mental health? Because you never really know when a fire is going to break out, right?
Right. Yeah, in the summer, it's definitely on everyone's mind. And yeah, we have that app that checks on the fires, and we have an app that checks on planes, so we can see when the airplanes are up, the fire planes, CDF planes are up in the air, we can see. So with those two, it works pretty well together. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
And I have boxes packed all the time. I just put them on the shelves. You know, they kind of look like my shelves, but they're boxes I can just grab if I need to head out.
Oh, nice. So you have a little bug out box, if you will. That's pretty
well,
cool.
yeah, it's more like the, photos and things
yeah.
we'd want to take with us, but
Yeah,
they're all ready to go.
Yeah, the sentimental stuff, the stuff that you cannot buy anywhere. That's the stuff
right.
you want to take with you. So
Yeah.
That's good to hear. But since you're an inner explorer, what all does that entail? Because, I mean, we explore the outside world, so inner explorer, I guess you explore the insides of yourself, right? Like
Right.
your emotions and all that? Awesome.
Well, yes, to begin with, but at
Okay.
this point, I can actually see or sense inside my physical body. So I can feel or sense tension in my connective tissue and in my bones, and I can focus on it, and I can let the tension release.
Interesting.
So at this point, I've shifted my skull bones, and I've grown 3/4 of an inch in my 50s because I've released all that burden, that tension that I was holding inside.
Huh.
I know, crazy, right?
That is crazy. And I'm sorry, you said in your 50s, but I would have swore you were like in your 30s. So,
Yeah, I think that's just the computer.
but you're able to feel that stress and everything. How does that work? Is that something that you just kind of went like, "Oh, I wonder what that feeling is," and then you kind of like Googled it, or you can't
No,
really?
it was a whole process that took years, but it started out with me working through my emotions. But it was a whole progression of what I call a depth of self-awareness. Right, when I
Okay.
started out, I had suppressed my emotions so much. I didn't really know how I felt. Right? I didn't know what my emotions were. It was just, I always said I was fine because I didn't want to know how I felt. But the next level of self-awareness is knowing your emotions. And then the next level is knowing the physical sensations under the emotions. Right? Because if we're feeling something like frustration, we use that word, frustration, to describe a set of physical sensations, right? Particular feeling inside of us. We call it frustration. Well,
Yeah.
we can become aware of those physical sensations. I know most of us aren't, and I wasn't, but we can become aware of it. And then, when I worked with that enough, eventually I became able to put my awareness inside my body itself. So I didn't even know it was possible. I had no idea it was possible when I started this journey. It was really strange to me. But that's why I wanted to share my story, because I want people to know what is possible.
Okay. Holy cow. That is really cool. And I mean, I think I'm similar-ish because I've never been able to ask people like, hey, whenever you feel this in your body, does it kind of feel like it feels almost like something is being relaxed? I mean, that's the best way to describe it is relaxed. Like I can feel each little tendril, if you will, of the muscle kind of like slowly get longer. And I'm just kind of like, is that what relaxation is? Is that what happens whenever you're meditating and stuff? Is that what that actually is? And
Right.
is that
It's
what
a
you're is that what
relaxation at a really deep level.
and is that what people are supposed to feel though?
Well, eventually, yes. I mean, that sounds pretty far along, right? To be able to feel that release and relax at a really deep level. And if I looked at my story in like simple terms, that's what I could call it. It's a relaxation at a deeper and deeper and deeper level. So now when things relax, I actually hear them. I hear the release of the adhesions in the connective tissue, and I feel them, and it feels like, and it sounds like, fabric ripping.
Oh, see, I've heard something similar, but it's something like in my head too, like near the pineal gland, supposedly. So I don't know what that is, but I've also felt it back here near the occipital lobes.
It's all over. We have so much tension stored inside that is just subconscious. So you became consciously aware of a little bit of it. But the amount we have inside, in my experience, is just unbelievable. I would never have known I had so much tension inside. And it's from all the programming that we go through in our lives.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime we're told not to do something that we want to do, right? When we hold ourselves back, we hold ourselves tight, that tension gets stored inside. And it becomes subconscious. We don't know it's there until we start to unwind and become aware of it, and then hopefully release it.
And whenever you say that, release it, I feel like a lot of us don't really want to let it go for some reason. Do you think that is because it's scary? Yeah. And
but also we can't necessarily let it all go. Right? I can relax my jaw now to a level that I couldn't before, but it won't stay relaxed because there's other tension that needs to release first. Right.
Okay.
So once that has released, I will be able to relax my jaw all the time. But that's why we can't hold ourselves like in a really good posture, right? We know the posture we should stand in, right?
Yep, like that.
But we can't stay that way because we've got other forces pulling us out of alignment. So once we release those forces, then we naturally move back into alignment.
So you're saying I'm defeating my own good posture by not letting my stress and tension go. I'm pulling my own self down. That sounds right.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, look at photos of people when they're young versus when they're old, right? We tend to shrink, and it's normally the neck, right, that shrinks. It gets tighter and tighter. And that's the burden that we've been carrying all the years, and the same thoughts, the same memories we replay over and over, and it just tightens that connective tissue, and it just pulls us down. So it's a literal physical burden that we carry, and until we release all those traumas and all that programming, we can't reverse that.
That is crazy. And you said that it all started with figuring out your emotions. So, but first it all also started because you were suppressing them. So,
Yes.
What all made you start to suppress them in the first place?
Well, I'm British. That's probably part of it.
Hey, I'm a guy that grew up in America, so I'm right there with you, okay?
And my family, we didn't talk about emotions, right? And I had multiple different traumas growing up. Started out when I was born. I was born with my right foot up against my right shin, so my whole body was twisted, torqued. So that they released that foot with kind of physical therapy for the first 6 weeks of my life, but it didn't release all of it, which I found out later. But it did release that foot, and then I was handed over for adoption. So adoption itself is a trauma. Right, and I was adopted into a family that had they had a little boy that they had adopted, then they adopted a little girl, and then the birth mother changed her mind. So they had to hand that baby back to the birth mother after months, I don't know how long, but it was months. And then I was the replacement into the family for that loss.
What? Oh, no.
So that wasn't a great start.
No.
And at 6 months old, we moved overseas. We moved to Barbados because my dad worked in international communications. And then we moved to Sierra Leone in West Africa. And when we were there, when I was about 4 or 5, something in that age range, I woke up one morning and saw flames coming in through the bedroom wall. And there was a house fire. So I was the one who woke up and alerted everyone.
Oh,
so
wow.
That was a good size trauma for someone that age.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then we moved to Hong Kong. And when we were in Hong Kong, so that was about age 7 through 11, I was sent to a boys' boarding school in England, halfway across the world.
Oh, wow.
And it was my brother's boarding school. And then for the first year, I was the only girl boarder. So there were day girls who were there during the day, and then they would go home, and I was left with all these boys aged 9 through 13.
Oh, man.
And they teased me mercilessly. It was horrific.
No, I can imagine.
So
I'm so sorry.
And then there was one trauma, I will say, trigger warning people if they want to not listen for a moment. When we were in Hong Kong, we were driving through a crowded market, Chinese market, and my dad had such a short temper. And he was really angry, and he was seething, and spittle would come out of his mouth, and he was moving the steering wheel back and forth, and he ran over a girl's ankle while she was holding her mother's hand, while my brother and I were in the back seat of the car. So that was quite a good trauma. Now, that one didn't come back to mind. I'd forgotten that until I started to work through the other ones. But it was there. And then, when I was in my teenage years, both of my parents became alcoholics. My mother would drink a bottle of sherry a day. My dad would go to the pub and come back, very drunk. So that was that. And then when I was 19, I woke up one morning and found my mother dead on the bathroom floor. Oh. So that was kind of the big trauma that kind of hid all the other ones. And we didn't talk about it, right? It kind of broke the family apart somewhat. And I just carried on with life. I moved out to the States 2 years later and have lived here ever since. I kind of hoped that I had left all of it behind in England. But of course, that doesn't happen.
No.
So I carried on with life, and it wasn't until I was in my late 30s when I had a business altercation with 2 other mothers at my boys' school. And these mothers were kind of like my dad, right? They were self-confident, self-assured, authority-type women in my mind. And I was a scared mother on the inside who had PTSD from my parents and all these things I'd been through. And they told me I'd done something wrong. And my mind would not stop spinning. Just all the thoughts, what I said, what they said, what I did, what I could have done differently, just all those different permutations over and over for 3 days. And it was at the end of that I realized, first of all, this is not normal. I didn't know anyone else who would react that intensely to something that was not that big a deal. But I also realized it felt a little bit like how I would react when my dad would tell me I'd done something wrong. So that was the little opening that, maybe there's something from my childhood that's still affecting me. So that was the beginning. That was kind of the eye-opening moments that started my journey.
Man, you've got to be one of the stronger people that I've known, and I've got to say thank you for pulling through all of that, so you could share your story with everyone and just being who you are, because I'm sure that you've shown your light around the world and it's made everyone's lives a little bit better.
Thank you. I'm trying. I was determined to change. I had to change because in the same time frame, I had 2 young boys. Ooh. And I'd been to the boys' school, right? So I was scared of boys in the age range 9 through 13. So I knew I had to do something before they got to that age so that I wasn't afraid of my own boys.
Oh,
right?
man.
So I had a time frame in mind as well.
And that doesn't help anything. Having a time frame?
Well, it probably did spur me on, right, to really dig deep and find those wounds and clean them out.
Yeah, you do have a good point. Some people don't do well with the deadline, and other people do really well under pressure.
Yes.
So what made you realize that you were going to be afraid of your own boys, though? Because they're your children. So didn't that seem kind of silly at first? Like, I'm not going to be afraid of my own boys. And then you had that, yes, I will moment.
I knew it was a possibility because I'd always avoided young boys.
Okay.
So, and of course I had two boys. I was given two boys for a reason, and that was probably part of the reason. I had to work through it. So it was just part of the journey. I just knew I had to change. I was living in fear all the time. I was just afraid of saying the wrong thing, making the wrong decision. I had to change. So, and I didn't know what to do. After this business altercation, I just knew I had to change, but I didn't know how. And in the time frame, I went to a doctor's appointment, and he happened to be a holistic physician. So he had more tools in his toolbox than most doctors do. And he recognized I was more stressed than I should be. I was a stay-at-home mother, two healthy boys, but he just saw something. He just knew I was just too stressed. And he asked me on a scale of 0 to 10 what my stress level was, and I said 8. And then he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize, it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19, because the tears from that event were still just under the surface. All those years later, it's nearly 20 years later at that point.
Wow.
Because I hadn't dealt with it. It was just all still living inside of me. So he happened to know a technique that's called EFT, which is short for Emotional Freedom Technique, or tapping. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of the acronym, but I haven't actually had someone do that.
Okay. So it's tapping on specific meridian or acupressure points as you're talking something through. And the kind of normal reaction of the nervous system is to have those emotions come up in you. And the tapping allows the energy of the emotions to release. So he tapped with me for about 15 minutes about my mother's death. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind for the first time ever without the tears. And that's when I realized that we hold those memories and those emotions physically in our body and that we can let them go. So that was the beginning.
Man, and that is crazy that he was able to just sit there and say, no, there's not something right here.
And I don't even remember why I went to see him, but it was nothing to do with mental health. So it was pretty cool he did that.
But he, as a holistic physician, that is just awesome, because I love holistic healing, and that just goes to show that, they're not that quack level of whatever the other people like to sit there and say they are, because they do have legit benefits to them, and they are 100% real. And it's just great that he was able to see something that maybe someone that pushes pills wouldn't be able to have seen,
Right.
So,
and he had the technique. Now the technique, it does seem a little woo-woo when you first start using it, right? You're tapping on your body. It's like, how can that be something that does something? So it was actually developed by a chemical engineer, which helped me because I have an engineering background. So I like to know something is going to work. Yeah. So I actually went home at the end of that day, and I learned everything I could about it. And it was in the early days of EFT. It's kind of morphed since then, but in the early days, the person who developed it had a booklet, like a workbook you could download, and you could learn it all just for free. And you still can. It's just these days it's moved more positive, and that doesn't work as well. So the original version, in my mind, works the best. But I still didn't necessarily believe it after that one experience with the doctor. So I wanted to try it out. I wanted to experiment. So at the time, I had a 17-year-old cat at home whose kidneys were starting to fail.
Oh.
And we had to give him a daily saline shot, so an injection of saline solution. And I hated injections. I hated needles. And the first time I gave him that shot, my hand was shaking so badly. And it was, it was emotional for me. It was hard to do, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day.
Oh, yeah.
So I tried it out. I tried out this technique. I tapped about every aspect of it, which is something you do with EFT. So I tapped about my hand shaking. I tapped about my fear of hurting my cat. and I tapped about all the memories of all the injections I had had over the years, because moving around the world, I had lots of different injections. And the next day, the needle slid right in. All that fear that had been living inside of me the day before had totally disappeared.
Wow.
So that's when I realized two things. First, I realized EFT is really powerful. And I realized I wanted to be on the other side of all that fear. So that's when I really started using it, because I was determined to get to that peaceful place that I wanted to be.
Okay. Man, I know you said it sounds a little woo-woo, blah, 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 but for some reason, whenever you were talking about it, my brain said, oh, hey, no, that works. And I don't know how, but I just felt that little tingle in my head that went, you should try this whenever you're done. And now I'm sitting here wondering, like, okay, now I've got to look it up. And I'm sure other people that are listening to this are going to be going, all right, well, if it works for her, if this guy is going to look it up, where can I look it up? And I guess we can just Google it, but we might want to actually...
but I have a PDF download on my website, which is annehintz.com. It's 2 pages. All the details, the notes, the important points are on those 2 pages. So, yeah,
look
feel
at that.
free to go there.
That's an awesome plugin.
but let me point something else out.
Yes.
That there have been multiple studies on EFT now, right? So it's been used in hospitals, it's been used for Vietnam veterans, different vets. So there is definitely evidence that it works now. In those early days there wasn't, but there definitely is now.
That is super cool, because I'm also one of the people that, as much as I want to believe in the who knows what, I want there to be something that I can go, yeah, it's here. It works. It is a bottle of water, because because someone tells me it's a bottle of water and it's a clear liquid, sometimes my brain goes, no. No.
Yeah, and that's why I tried it out. That's why I had to do it with the cat, and that convinced me. But yes, there are other studies people can look at these days.
Yeah, and what was the next thing that you did with your newfound power?
Right. Well, I started noticing during the day. You have to notice first when you're emotional. Because until you notice that, right, you can't do anything about it.
Yep.
So I would go through my day, I'd ask myself, how am I feeling right now? And then I'd ask myself, do I want to feel this way again? And the answer was normally no. So then I would tap, and I would acknowledge what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and just allow the emotions to release and come back to peace. And then I would carry on with my day and ask myself the same question. Now, to begin with, I could only remember to ask myself once a day. But as the days went by, it got easier and easier. And it does get easier. And each time I'd bring myself back to peace, carry on. And I realized as the weeks went by that I was becoming calmer. I was less reactionary, right? I couldn't be triggered as easily. And it was really nice. But I wanted it to go faster. I wanted more and I wanted it faster. So I wrote down every trauma from my childhood, every big one, every little one, all the teasing, the words they would say, the phrases my dad would say. It was multiple sheets of paper. And I worked through one each night for an hour to an hour and a half each night until I'd gone through them all.
Oh, man.
And then, things really started to change and I really felt different. The thoughts that used to go through my mind, right? I was very judgmental, self-critical. Those thoughts disappeared. They stopped coming into my mind. And it felt like I was living in a different reality because I've never had a quiet mind, or at least I couldn't remember ever having a quiet mind. And that's when I realized those thoughts that we have, they're from someone else, right? These were from my dad. They were things he had said that I had taken on as my own, and I just replayed them in my mind. And I think we all do that.
Yeah, I do think that that's a big one. I do find that a lot of my own traumas, well, maybe not traumas, but the stresses that I carry around tend to be the cage that other people have built for me, and I'm trying to live in it and carry it around. And it doesn't really work that way.
Well, it does. I mean, that's the problem. It does, right? We keep going, and then we do it to our children, right? We tell our children the same things, and then they're programmed, and they do it to their kids
until we want to break.
Right.
And I guess maybe it takes a special someone to break from this programming, because then once that person breaks from that programming, they can start the other programming, the healing first, and then reprogramming the bad code. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think more of this information is being shared, so there are more of us doing this. Yeah. I remember when my kids were small, after I'd started doing this work, but I wasn't as far as I am now, that my dad used to say, one of the things he used to say was, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yep.
I remember that thought coming into my mind with my voice, but it never came out, right? Because I'd started this work, right? So I was aware the thought was there, but I never let it out. And I think more of us are hopefully doing that.
Yeah, and it is something that has been going around, like you said, people are starting to have a shift somewhere. And it's so great to see people breaking out of the cycle of addiction, the cycle of trauma, and all of this. But there is a caveat with it. It sucks to go through.
It does. It does. But eventually I got to the place where I realized those emotions and those memories are simply energy stuck in the body. Now, it's easy to say that. Right, that's what I'm saying. It's easy to say it.
Yeah.
But I got my mind around that fact that it's just energy stuck inside the body. And once we let it go, it's gone. Right? Those memories and those emotions, they don't live outside of us. All they do is live inside of our body. And we can let it go. And once we let it go, it's no longer there. Yeah. And that's what this work does. Now, not all inner work does this, right? I don't think meditation does this quite the same way. It's the physical component of releasing the energy that's stored in the nervous system that allows us to change at a deep level.
Yeah, it almost sounds to me like a drum, because percussion, it's a hit, and whenever, like, have you ever seen a hi-hat or a cymbal crash in super slow-mo? Like, a solid metal disc suddenly warps and gets all sorts of funny looking from one hit. And it's the same kind of thing, I think. Just, it doesn't look like it's doing much, but underneath the surface, it's doing a lot more.
Right. It's those vibrations that's changing things inside of us.
So, and with energy, though, like you said, once it's gone, it's gone. And do you think that that's why some people don't want to let that kind of stuff go, is because, oh no, I liked that memory a little bit.
Well, the memory stays.
I
mean, sometimes you have to go after it and find it if you want to remember it. But it's the emotion that goes. And once the emotion is gone, it no longer needs to come into your mind, because there's nothing. The thoughts and memories come into our mind because there's energy stuck inside with them. So something triggers that memory or that thought, and it comes back up. And once we've let go of it, it just doesn't need to anymore. So, I mean, sometimes we don't know who we're going to be without that trauma inside of us, and we're afraid of that. But it's just energy stuck inside of us. It's negative. It's actually dis-ease inside of us. So it's always going to be better to release it. You've just got to go through that releasing process, but it's just energy stuck inside. Once you release it, it's gone. And there's freedom on the other side.
It's kind of like a towel being wrung out, right? All that stress and tension is the water in the towel, and it's just, and then there you are.
Yeah.
You're not entirely dry. You got to sit out a little bit a little longer, and still maintain.
And then there's another layer. There's always another layer, but life gets more fun along the way, right? You become more peaceful. And I got to the place where releasing tension just felt so good. There was nothing else I wanted to do. So I just kept doing it because it feels really good, right? I mean, at this point, I'm releasing tension inside the bones, my atlas bones, my axis bone, and the top of my neck. And it just a relaxation. I think I'm not religious, but Jesus talked about peace beyond understanding. Right? We don't realize the tension that we're storing inside. But when you relax, right, you're relaxing beyond where you knew you could relax. So in my mind, that is the peace beyond understanding.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's something that we're carrying around with us all the time, the stress. And I think you did hit a point on it earlier where you said, without this trauma, who would I be? And I think that that's why a lot of people like to carry it around, because change is scary. And if I don't know who I am, then what in the world is actually real? So how did you navigate that? Because it sounds like you kind of spoke from experience there.
Yeah, it was scary to look back at those memories, right? And to let all those tears flow. But we expend so much energy keeping those tears inside. I now think that all the tears that we never shed in childhood are still inside of us. They're ready to come out. Once we access those memories, those tears will come out, which releases so much energy, right? It's such a burden for us to hold them in. It's dis-ease to hold them in. So we have to do that. If we want to find the peace on the other side, we just have to go through it.
Oh, man. It almost sounds equivalent to, like, digging a well. You know, the deeper you go, the more you find. But that's kind of the thing, you know?
Yes.
Well, but like you said before, sometimes you don't realize that you have a trauma underneath a trauma. And then you have a trauma underneath that trauma. So
Yes.
essentially, some people are building blocks of trauma, unfortunately. And some people only have one giant block of trauma. And some people just may have a little one. But everyone handles traumas and stresses entirely differently. So with that, you think that EFT works wonders on everyone around, right? Because you said that there's some research on it, but everyone kind of responds to it about the same, right?
It's different for different people, but I think it's based on how they do it. And because
okay.
there are some keys to using it. I mean, it's now I know, right now I can go inside my body. I know that it's only the negative emotions that are stored as tension inside. The positive
Really?
ones aren't there. They're not stored the same way. So we have to access the darkness or the negative or the tension. So a lot of people using EFT these days are using it more like for affirmations. But they're not stored in our body. It's the tension that's stored in our body. It's the negative that's stored in our body. So that's what we need to work on. Also, a lot of people these days use scripts. Right? Someone else is saying the words and people are tapping along to that. That's not nearly as powerful as using our own words.
Really?
Because it's our own words that are stored in our neural pathways, right? We thought things. We thought things at the time, and that got stored with tension. Those thoughts, those words, the collection of words. So if we're using someone else's words, it's not going to go down that neural pathway that we want to go down to find that tension. So we have to use our own words.
Okay. That's actually really good to know, because I do know some people that have used scripts and they were like, yeah, that just didn't seem to do anything. And it seems that using your own words is really the key. And I'm going to have to pass along that information, so thank you.
And you have to do it over and over again. So like with my mother's death, I did it with the doctor, but I also did it multiple times on my own. So I would talk through the whole experience of waking up that morning. It was quiet. She normally had the radio playing. So just everything that happened that day from beginning to end while tapping, then going back to the beginning, talking through it again while tapping. And each time you do that, the subconscious mind is opening up and more details of the story come to mind. Right? So maybe there's one, like, for example, my brother had been at his girlfriend's house. I'd never met her. So he was called back to our house when my mother died. And he came with his girlfriend, who I'd never met before. She got me a cup of coffee. And I'm not really a coffee drinker, but back then I would drink it only if it had milk and sugar. And she brought me a black cup of coffee. So I was annoyed with her. Now that memory, right, that's a weird small part of the whole story of finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor. And it came to mind after I'd tapped through the events several times.
Oh, man.
So I just tapped through it again and again until I could just tell it like a story, like I'm reading from a book. There's no emotion left inside of me about the event. That's when I know I've cleared it out.
Oh, wow. Huh. Man, that
So a lot of people don't do that, right? A lot of people don't do that, go back to the beginning. And certainly not with scripts or online, right? Because no one wants to sit through you telling the same story over and over and over again. So that's another key.
Okay. And one of the things that I have to ask, if I had a memory pop up on me while I was doing this kind of work, part of me would think, nah, that was just my imagination. How did you differentiate between that being an actual memory that came back to surface versus something that you just decided to fill in the gap with?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes our ego will not want us going down the path we're going down, right? So it might start thinking about a shopping list, right, or something, right, totally off what we're looking at. But if it's anything, it's a memory, and if we're tapping on something and a memory pops into our mind, it's associated somehow.
Okay.
So what I would do is I would write that down. I'd add that to my list.
Ah.
I'd continue working on what I was working on, and then I would go and look at that memory.
Ah, so that is actually something that someone doing this with themselves would need to do, is kind of, as you're going along, as you unlock new memories or experiences and emotions, to write them down and catalog them until essentially there's no emotional callback, essentially.
Right, and you're opening up the subconscious mind, right? A lot of us say, I mean, I said for a long time, I don't remember much of my childhood.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people say that. But
Hi.
yeah, but it starts coming back to mind, right? As your subconscious mind opens up, it's all inside of you. You've just suppressed it or hidden it. So more of it will come to mind as you do this work.
That's so interesting. Do you think that you've gotten near the end of it?
No. Well, I mean, yes and no. So let me go into step 2 of my journey. So what we talked about was EFT, and that was kind of step 1.
Yeah.
And as I was doing it, I said that subconscious mind is opening up. Along with that, the self-awareness is deepening. So I became aware of my emotions. Then I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions. So I could feel where tension was in my body. I could feel where frustration was, where sadness was, where fear was. And then I just spent the time to feel those feelings. Because I'd been in a group at the time, and the guru, the head of the group, every week he would say, you don't have to meditate. It's all about feeling your feelings. But when he said that, I didn't know what my feelings were. But I was doing this EFT at the time out of the group, and I became aware of my feelings. So what does he mean by feel your feelings? I didn't know what that meant. So I thought, okay, let me try it. Let me see what he meant, see if I can do it. So I was doing the dishes one day, standing at the kitchen sink, and I had a thought that I could tell had some emotion around it. I can't remember what it was, but it might have been something like, I'm afraid of making a phone call. Right, so that's a thought with fear. So I think the thought, feel the fear, right? I could feel it in my stomach area, my solar plexus area. So then I tried to feel it, but I realized every time I tried to focus on it, I would take a breath or I would move and I would lose my focus on the feeling. So I had to hold myself like a statue. I stopped breathing. Once I could feel where the fear was, I didn't take any more breath. I just held my breath right there, held myself like a statue, and just focused on feeling that fear. And at some point, obviously, I'd have to take a breath. And then I would think the thought again, feel the fear again, noticed it had diminished somewhat. So then I would do it again and again and again, just like with the EFT, right? Talking through the story. Now I'm feeling the emotion over and over again until it was fully gone.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, it becomes easy to make the phone call, right? Because there's no longer any fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing that every day instead of the tapping, right? At that point, I didn't need to tap so much. I would when I was triggered, but I would lay on the sofa and I would bring collective traumas to mind because I'd done my childhood at this point, right? So I would think of something like 9/11, right? We all have our own experience of what happened that day. We watched different things or we had heard from different people. So I brought all those memories to mind and just felt them, just felt those feelings and allowed them to release. So that was like a deeper layer of tension that I was releasing. And at some point, I became able to keep my awareness inside my body after the tension had released. It's a weird thing to experience, even hard to put into words, right? But that's what happens, right? So imagine you have a stomach ache or a toothache, right? You can feel, you can sense where that pain is coming from. Yeah. But once the ache has gone, You can't put your awareness back inside that tooth or back inside your stomach because there's nothing calling your attention to it anymore.
Yeah.
I could put my awareness inside my body, and I could move it around, and I could notice where there was tension versus no tension. So I would find a place with tension, focus on it, just feel it, just accept it, acknowledge it, just look at it, but not try and change it in any way. And it would release. So then I would do the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm doing exactly the same thing as I was with EFT and with feeling feelings, but now at a deeper level inside the body. And so it took me many, many months of doing that work in my torso before I could put my awareness inside my head. And that was mind-blowing because the pain inside my left cheek was unbearable. It was so intense. And it had been there my whole life because it was connected to my foot that was up against my shin when I was born.
What?
Through the connective tissue, all the way down there. So that made me realize how much we store inside. We're just not aware of it, right? It's in our subconscious mind. We just don't know it's there. But it's
crazy.
affecting us.
And, man, I could not believe that would affect your foot. What?
Well, it's on the connective tissue. I'm sensing through the connective tissue.
That's
so it took me, I'm
interesting.
still working on a little bit of it. It's kind of pulled apart. It was like a big knot to begin with, and it's now just these little pieces left in different places. But I know there's still a lot of tension left in my skull. And I think once it's all released, my skull will be symmetrical. It's not right now. It's not right now. And my neck isn't either. So I still got a lot of work to do, and I can feel it, right? I can try and relax, but I can feel I can't fully relax because I can feel this tension still left in the bones. So that's why I know I'm not there yet.
Fair enough. How many more inches are you trying to grow?
Well, I think there could be another inch in me.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's actually really impressive because you're not supposed to after your growth plates stop, you know? So this is literally just from relaxing your connective tissues, your muscles, all of it.
Right. It's the gap between the bones in my neck too. They're getting bigger. I have X-rays that I can see that there's more space between them than there were before.
That's really crazy. And most people would not believe this. So if you don't believe anything that she is saying, you better try it yourself.
I have X-rays on my website. You can check them out. They're all there.
And that website was annehintz.com?
It
right?
was, yes.
All right. And boy, what was one of the first things that you wanted to tell someone else whenever you first had your eureka moment, but you felt like you couldn't say it?
Like about the changes?
Or just like, hey, I noticed this in my body.
Oh, the physical changes.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it'd be pretty hard for me to tell someone, like I said before, I can't really express that kind of stuff because other people would just be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, it's kind of always like that. But the weirdest thing was when I actually first heard and felt that the adhesions in the connective tissue releasing. That was a scary moment for me. It's like I thought maybe I was hurting myself. Right? So I had to go home and research it. And then I had a name for it. It's like, oh, it's the connective tissue that's releasing. So at that point I could talk to people about it, but it really wasn't until I got the X-rays and looked at them, right? Because I could feel my skull bones relax. I hadn't known they weren't relaxed until they relaxed, and then I realized, okay, they clearly weren't relaxed before. But I could say that, but that doesn't mean anything until. But then I got the X-rays, and then I looked at the old X-rays because I knew things had shifted, and I could see the differences, and that's when it became easier for me.
That is way too cool. So real quick, you said we've gone over step 1 and step 2. Was
Step
there
2
a third
was
step?
feeling the feelings.
Feeling the feelings.
Step 3 was actually going inside the body.
Okay, step 3 is going inside the body.
Yeah.
So whenever you're inside the body, do you have like a little visualization of your awareness, if you will, so that it makes it easier for you to pinpoint within yourself?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. So, visualization is kind of in the thinking mind, kind of like imagination. You're in your thinking mind. When I'm doing this, I'm out of my thinking mind, I'm in my sensing mind. So, let's do an experiment for a moment. So,
Okay.
So, tell me or put into words how your right kneecap feels right now.
Stiff.
Okay, so there was a very short moment, because that was very fast. There was a very short moment that you went inside and you sensed your knee. That is what I do. That is the sensing part. You then translated that into words using the thinking mind. Right?
Oh.
I'm in the sensing mind. So I'm actually feeling how my bones or my tissue feel inside. So I'm literally in that 3D space inside of my head or my body.
Oh, okay. Huh. That makes more sense now. Yeah. So that's why you can't really put it into words, because there's no words associated with it.
Right. Right.
It's kind of like, how do you describe something that doesn't exist? You don't. Because
it's awareness.
Yeah.
Right? You're being aware of somewhere. So you were aware of your kneecap for a moment. So I'm just able to do that for longer. Right, and it's pretty intense now. It's like a laser beam. And I can hold my awareness on tension for, it's still only a few seconds. It's not a long time. And the adhesion will release, or my neck will crack, which is another adhesion releasing. So, yeah.
Oh, man. So whenever you have those moments of mindfulness throughout the day, does it distract you anymore? Like it first did? You don't have to stand like a statue all the time now, right? Like you're not just walking along and you just go, whoop. All right, now we're good to go.
Right, yeah. Now, to begin with, I did. And once I was able to put my awareness inside my body, I had to focus on it. I had to close my eyes and actually focus on doing it. Now I can multitask. I can do it many times. Like during the day, I can do it when I'm doing the dishes, when I'm watching TV, when I'm walking. So yes, it's much easier to do now. And I do it much more often. I mean, my neck probably cracks 50 to 100 times a day.
Oh, man.
It's just loosening up. But it's really interesting to watch. And there's again, I'm not religious, but in the Bible, the phrase stiff-necked people is in there like 18 times. I mean, what does that even mean? I'd never heard of it before. But I looked it up once I looked up the word neck in the Bible once my neck started to release. So years ago, I couldn't bend my neck here. It would not bend. I have a video of it. But now I can bend my head, my skull on top of my neck.
Oh, wow.
Because I've been releasing that tension in the axis and the atlas bone. So it's the two that allow that movement of the head on top of the neck. So it's really interesting to see that connection. It's like, okay, you're not supposed to be a stiff-necked person, right? It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And this helps to release that.
Oh, man. Okay, so what happens whenever you crack your neck and you're just kind of standing there? Does it actually, you feel it, but you feel the crack, you hear the crack. Does it actually give you that little bit of a, not endorphin, but like whenever you normally crack your neck, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I never used to crack my neck. I never used to do.
Because you couldn't. Okay, that's right.
Right. So I'm just focusing on some tension somewhere.
So how did it feel, real quick, how did it feel to actually turn your neck for the first time?
Well, it's been a very slow release, right, over years. So, I mean, it was pretty weird when my neck started cracking, because it's like I'm not doing it myself. I don't feel like it's like I'm focusing on that tension and releasing it. And then my body kind of knows how to move to release that tension in my neck. And so it just happens.
Oh, so you said you let your body kind of, it knows where to move. So you kind of let your body go on autopilot, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Huh.
It knows how to do it. I mean, earlier on in the journey too, like in the second step, I guess, when I was doing the feelings and starting to release and unwind. I went through Kundalini energy at that point for a few months, and it was just kind of like an unwinding process, and it got to the place where I could relax my jaw in a way that had never relaxed before, and it started to move back and forth like a metronome. Just an unwinding of all the tension. It wasn't all the tension, but it was an unwinding of some of the tension. And I could stop it at any point, but whenever I relaxed, it would do that. Just the body again, knowing what to do, what it has to do to unwind all that tension.
Huh. That is crazy. The body seems to know a lot more about itself than what it actually lets on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But it's hidden. All that knowledge is hidden inside. We just got to release and relax ourselves enough that it can start to show us the way.
And how do you think is best for people to go about all of this? Of course, you want to push that EFT and everything, but I guess really my question is, what do you think is the best motivator for someone to want to change, for someone to want to relax and release that tension?
That's tricky, isn't it? Because I was really determined. So I think you have to be determined to change the direction of your life and to be a different person, to be more of your true self, right? Our true self is who we are underneath all of this tension that we've held in all of these years. So someone's got to want to do it. And then the first step is noticing, like noticing during the day. Continue to ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Right? Am I being triggered by something or not? Right? What am I doing? Just noticing during the day. And then some people might be able to go straight into step 2, right? Some people who have awareness, a deeper level of awareness than I started with, might be able to feel those sensations of the emotions and just sit in them, feel them, and allow them to release. But the key thing that I learned along my journey, well, one of them, was that it's all about acceptance, right? We're not trying to change anything. Obviously, in the back of our minds, right, we're doing this for a reason.
Yeah.
But the tension releases once it's accepted and acknowledged as it is. It's just felt the way it is. Just like a friend coming to you and wanting to tell you, right, everything that happened. They don't want you interjecting or trying to change them. They want to be accepted. So we need to accept what happened in those traumas. We need to accept the emotions. We need to accept the sensations and accept the tension. That's when it releases. Once it's been accepted or given enough attention, then it releases.
Very interesting. I think that would probably be some of the whole setbacks on my storytelling for myself, is that I'm still trying to narrate the end of some stories because I didn't like the way that they ended. It's like, yeah, we're going to shift that perspective a little bit. And it's like, no, I need to keep it true and straight where it was and not give it any justifications for this, that, or another. I just need to sit there and say, it is what it is. It happened the way it happened, and this is where I'm at now.
And to feel the emotions that were there.
And to feel. You're correct. I did forget step 2. I did forget step 2.
Because they might be uncomfortable. If you wanted to change the story, there's a reason. It's because it's uncomfortable. The actual story is uncomfortable. But you have to feel that discomfort.
And I've got to dig deep to find out why that discomfort's there. And I may have to go deeper than that. So.
Yes.
We are nearing the end of this episode, so before we get too far into it, I do like asking people, would you like to be on the show again? Because there's no way we can get all of your story and everything else that happens in just 1 hour.
Sure, I'd be happy to, especially if you've done some of the work in the meantime.
Sweet. Yeah, and that way it can be kind of a checkup and just... we can see how much more you've grown. We can see, have I grown any inches? And we can see just, well, I can probably come up with at least one good story in between then and now, you know, of like, well, not story, but experience, I should say. Because the story and experience, 2 totally different things.
Yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with for this evening, or any time of day, whenever they're going to be listening to it, really.
Sure. I love to let people know that there's a greater depth to life than we're aware of. Because I didn't know it when I started. Right now, I can hear not only with my ears, but I can feel sound vibrations throughout my body, right? Which makes listening to music a lot more fun. But I can also, right, hear or feel vibrations like from a conversation, right? There's a depth to it that wasn't there before. Right? When just hear with your ears, it's not the same thing. And I've released so much tension in my head that I can actually sing different notes. My voice has changed because our skull is our echo chamber for our voice, right? So that's changed. I can also see into other people more easily. I can tell when they're holding tension in their bodies because I can see that in myself. Yeah. So it makes life more fun. So I really encourage people to do this work.
That is awesome. And one more time, your website?
My website's annehintz.com, and I'm very active on Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel. And I have one thing that I'm putting on this summer, one in-person event, which is a retreat for women who've lost a parent. And we're going to do all this work. We're going to go through and release all the trauma from the loss of a parent and their childhood with the parents and their future without the parents. So I would love any women to join me on that.
That is super awesome. That reminds me that we've really got to push this episode out there then. Try to get that attendance level up there really high. And when is it? Is the date to be determined?
It's in July.
In July. Okay.
Yes, 25.
So, sweet. Then we'll make sure to get this episode out there, push it to as many people as we can, try to get that attendance level up there. I'll be working on some EFT stuff from the 2 pages, right? That are on annehintz.com.
Yeah.
And then we should check in. I don't know. How many months do you think we should check back in? It's got to be a little bit.
It does. It does. So maybe summertime.
Okay. So how about let's check in after your retreat?
Okay.
Of sorts.
Okay,
that sounds like
August.
a good time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sweet.
Sounds good. Great. Thanks for the great conversation and great questions.
Oh, no. Thank you for your great story and for your great perspective and for letting me know that we can all change our perspectives if we just relax a little bit.
We can.
So everyone out there listening, thank you very much for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And once again, this is your inner explorer, Anne Hintz. And this has been Keegan with Retrieving Sanity. So we'll check y'all next week. Shalom. All right. And stop recording.